Welcome back, you truth-seeking, God-fearing rebels. This is not gospel.
I can explain the problem.
You can explain the problem?
I got a problem.
We got problems here in the studio.
I got a
We're
problem.
supposed to be talking about biblical masculinity, but Joel, you said I can tell you what the problem is. So what's our problem, Joel?
Yeah. Okay, so I recently, over the past year, had my social media. I'm a worship leader. I do like worship videos online, and I've got long hair. Okay.
Bingo.
So here's where it starts.
You're clearly not Christian.
I've got about 400,000 followers online, and every single day I've got these dudes.
Cut your hair.
And it's not everybody, but it's definitely like a portion of like what you'd call. It's definitely a portion of men that I would say are really confused on what biblical masculinity is, because, dude, I'll just tell you, and maybe this is funny. I don't think this is going to get us banned. I get called gay and trans about 20 times a day. Now, granted, there's a lot of love. There's a lot of love too, but it's always from these dudes that
have a misconception of masculinity.
Well, they're probably all in those small churches where the preacher's screaming. And I made a comment yesterday to someone, and he came on the page and he was accusing me of all these things. And I normally don't jump in the comments. I actually sent him a private message. And I was like, "Hey man, I think you're really confused on biblical masculinity." And I told him, I said, "I believe if Jesus came today to knock on your door, you would call him a homosexual because he wasn't wearing blue jeans and he didn't have the military fade." And he didn't have some T-shirt.
Strong words,
and that's when
So that's where we're at. So
I think these guys, I think if you take like the average like trans person, okay, that is very confused on masculinity, and you take these.
We're not saying that there is one only type of trans person, and we're also not saying that they're just average. So before you get offended and butthurt, shut up. Proceed.
Well, what I'm saying is you've got trans people, in my opinion, that are very confused on masculinity.
Right.
And I think you have these old school Baptist men who are probably abusive that are equally, if not more, confused on what masculinity is, what biblical masculinity is. Because from what I've seen and from the people that I've seen, biblical masculinity is I neglect my wife's emotions. I neglect my children's emotions. I don't talk. I don't ever emote. I yell when I'm angry.
Yeah.
And I feel like it's that, but I have blue jeans, I have a military fade, and I got a T-shirt.
I look masculine.
Yeah. Or I'm massively overweight, and if someone were to, if I didn't have my gun on me and someone came at my wife and me and my kids in public, they would go to town on us because I can't actually physically handle myself.
So you think we don't know, we ain't got our thumb on the pulse of what biblical masculinity really looks like? We're confused.
I'm saying it's these kind of old school Baptist men that are really confused.
So it's not just the church's fault, I'll say, because across the boards, anybody who has two brain cells to rub together admits that there's an attack on masculinity, like at large. Not just biblical masculinity, but there's an attack on masculinity, period. And I, for one, am grateful that even in our entertainment and stuff like that, we're kind of getting out of the men are disgusting pigs era. And we're getting back to the fact that men and women do have differences, right? Like, I feel like there's some common sense beginning to come back. First, we're not trying to belittle any issue when we approach something with some levity. He's got a puppet over his shoulder, for crying out loud, guys, all right? So we're going to be comedic with some of our commentary. It is what it is. Now that the disclaimer is over, I feel like there are two main examples that you can start with for biblical masculinity that will have a profound impact on what you think it is to be a man as a Christian. So the two examples, obviously, are Jesus Christ, right? First and foremost, and David. And the reason I picked David is because the Bible says that David, King David, was a man after God's own heart. He was chasing after God. It doesn't mean that he was perfect, obviously. Like, David's had many screw-ups. Yeah. But he was pursuing God's attitudes. So if you start with Jesus, first and foremost, what you see is he was willing to sacrifice everything for those he loved, and in fact for his bride.
And that's kind of one of the things that I would say with these men on my posts who are very confused is I would say they sacrifice absolutely nothing, because the fact that you're able to come onto a stranger's page and say these horrible things, I know you're saying it at home. You're probably giving your family hell at home.
Some of it just comes with the fact that people feel like there's no consequence on the internet. People that talk out and hate and on the internet is just because that's what it becomes, is this toxic cesspool where people feel like they can say what they want.
Well, but
a lot of it does, though, stem from the way you are at home is who you are online.
I've never met someone in person who was nasty online that wasn't the worst person I've ever met in my life.
So, in reference to Jesus' masculinity and being willing to sacrifice everything for your family, for your bride, let's say, like Jesus did, 1 Timothy says, he who does not provide for his family is worse than an infidel.
Yeah.
Or worse than unbeliever, depending on what translation you follow. So providing for your family, though, that thought of, well, as long as I make the money, it doesn't matter.
I think the money's one small aspect of the providing.
Well, it is, because if it was just about money, right? If providing for your family was just about money in terms of biblical masculinity, then just turn the world over to the Rockefellers. Right, because they make all the money, the freaking rich and powerful. That's it. That's the standard that you want. But providing for your family isn't just money; it's about the sacrifice part. So let's look at the sacrifice part. I've heard people say, and I've seen the ministers you're talking about, the pastors who say nothing matters as much as the gospel. So I'm going to be a pastor first, and a father second, and a husband second, or whatever. I have issue with that. Because to me, that's not sacrificing yourself for the bride. Like, that's not laying down your pride and humility and getting humble and laying all that down. Some of that is giving into ego. There are plenty of pastors, I'm not going to call them out by name, but there are plenty of pastors who aren't pastoring the church correctly. They're not doing it with the right intentions. There are plenty of pastors who are doing it just because of the ego trip of, I'm in charge, I'm in power, this is the ministry that God's given me, and I'm special.
I'd say
then there are a lot of pastors who are doing it for the right reason.
I'd say if you are neglecting your family and you're doing the ministry and you would make that statement, I think it's all ego. I don't think you're in it for Jesus at all. And I think it shows who you are in the home. And that's one thing I ask people is like the question I ask people is like, what do the people closest to you say about you? That's who you are.
My wife works a nice job, gets a nice check. She's a very successful woman. I'm very proud of her. But at the same time, I lead my family by directing my kids' attitudes, by instructing my 3 boys how to be a man, what that looks like, by leading them in the gospel, by regularly, like making sure we're in the Word, and by setting a standard and example of readiness. Sometimes as a man, we got to give up our dream and let our wife chase hers, but at the same time, not give up our position as when there's a threat that comes at the door, we got to answer, and we got to be ready to take care of it. And when there's big, massive decisions that have to happen, yes, we get to our partner and say, how are we going to handle this? But I feel like it's up to the man to bear that kind of weight, just like Jesus. That's the self-sacrifice. He made the decisions while he's here. He's like, give me the bread. Give me the bread and fishes. I'll feed the people. Give me the supplies. I'll make the decisions of how to figure it out. And I think that's the example of what masculinity really is you take what you have and you use it. But Jesus also gave the parables of the good and faithful servant. You got 3 servants. One of them buries his talent in the sand, and when the Lord arrives, he digs it back up and says, here you go, here's your money. And he says, you wicked and lazy servant, get him out of here. Yeah. Nobody wants to be that guy. In Jesus' standard, as a man, you're supposed to work with what you have and what you're given. And you're supposed to be faithful over it and a good steward over it and set that precedent and example for your kids. Now you flash to David. Dude, David freaking manhandled a lion. He killed a lion with his bare hands. David led armies. He led men. He was a leader of men. He was a decision maker. Remember, before he was even king, there was a song that they were singing of Saul has slayed his thousands and David has slayed his 10,000s. Yeah. And then we're not even talking about David and Goliath, bro. Like, he freaking took out Goliath. David was ready, was capable. He was passionate. He loved freaking hard, man. Like, he loved serious. Like, David's love was serious.
And maybe back to, like, my problem, what I think is the problem in America, I think, like, these dudes on the internet, I know I've come face to face with some of these type of what you'd call just redneck good old boy dudes.
Yeah.
And in a previous time, before whatever, like, before I'm doing the worship leader thing, whatever, I have tried to bait several of these people into fights, and they won't. They want to yell in their truck.
Yeah.
One, you don't do what you say.
Yeah.
But number two, like, you're talking a dangerous game with words. That's why I don't insult people ever.
Yeah.
Unless I'm ready to go. Because I have been in situations, like I said, before the worship leader thing, of like, let's go. Won't do it. Get out of your truck. Won't do it.
So
before Donald Trump came on the scene and the liberals freaked out, I would go to concerts and it's like, oh, that's rock and roll.
yeah.
We go to concert now. Ashley will come to me 3 times during a concert. She'll be like, yeah, I had 3 people come up and ask if you were trans. That was never, ever a thing. It was never a thing pre-Donald Trump.
I believe that's part of the pendulum sway, like we talked about. We've been pushed in this progressive direction for so long, where now that it's swinging that other way, some people are going to swing freaking hard. And it's up to the correct voices who got a good head on their friggin' shoulders to find that middle ground of like, this is actual truth. Like, first off, it's scripture based. You need to know what the Bible says about who Jesus is. You need to know what the Bible says about who these manly figures in the Bible are. We need to know those things. I know that sounds Sunday school, but it's like, dude, study who these people were. Because you can be a leader in your family. You can be a leader, a role model, an example, whether you're making $200,000 a year or $20 a week.
The 2 worst that I've actually physically in person seen, knew very well, the 2 worst situations I've ever seen. The man was making over $100K.
Yeah.
Everyone was provided for, and dude, I could not tell you what was going on. Like, we'd get censored on YouTube if I told you what was going on in these homes.
So if you're willing to sacrifice your family, your wife and your kids on the altar of your job, and I'm not saying all these guys who have a big fancy job, I'm not saying that that's what they're doing, all of them. But if you're willing to sacrifice your role in the household as a leader, as a demonstrator of manhood and what that means for your kids and stuff like that, if you're willing to sacrifice all of that and put them on the altar of your big fancy $100,000 job, your priorities are wrong. That's not biblical masculinity, because there's nothing humble about that at all.
But they're not even putting them on the altar of the job. They're just coming home and raising absolute hell because they're so angry about what their dad and their mom did and all these things that they never dealt with. And it's like, it goes back to this biblical masculinity thing of like, their image of I am a man is a soul patch, short and military fade,
and I think
blue jeans.
So that's the thing to address. Masculinity has got nothing to do with look or like the visual. Masculinity, but there is. Now, you've got to be fit and healthy and competent.
This is the main issue we have in America. And this is what I told the guy last night, and he got extremely... he was like, what do you mean I would call Jesus gay? I was like, if Jesus was given the Sermon on the Mount, and Jesus looked like Jesus did 2,000 years ago, you would go to your buddy, and you go, man, he's a little fruity, isn't he?
Yeah.
Because I'm not saying Jesus had long hair. I don't think he actually did. But, even if it was just a little bit of a curl of a whatever, it'd be like, well, that's like Harry Styles. That boy's fruity. You know what I'm saying? And it's just like, dude,
we've heard people say that before, that like if Jesus came into your church, you'd throw him out. I believe a lot of churches and a lot of church people, some of them are well-meaning, but they're flailing around trying to figure out what masculinity is. And that's why I say you got to get down to basics and look at what Jesus did and look at what David did, these guys. Yeah. Jesus always put the sheep first as a shepherd. He always did. He put the needs of the sheep first. And I think that being your foremost tool is like, hey, am I willing to sacrifice of myself? Masculinity is not about the dollar sign.
But also, can we also say that most of these street-looking redneck dudes would not fight? They're not actual like physical men. Like, I don't know if you've ever like tried to bait a narcissist, like I said before, the worship leading thing. But what they'll do is like they'll say the worst things in the world to you, and then you want to fight, and they go, whoa, man, but I was just kidding. Yeah. And then they gaslight you.
One of the main key parts of masculinity is self-control.
These men have none of that.
you're supposed to model self-control as a godly man. It doesn't mean that you don't, and people use this example all the time, it doesn't mean that you don't get angry and plaid the whip like Jesus did.
Yeah.
He saw people doing a severe injustice, and it all was about God, and what it was about love. He loved his Father, and he loved the temple. He loved that sacred place, and he saw these people in there just turning it into a den of thieves, and he freaked out on them. You know, he turned the tables over. He plaid the whip. It was premeditated. He made a whip, and he's like, I'm going to whip them out of here. So there are times to do that, and then again, that's about readiness, being capable.
I tell this to people before when you're dealing with a horrible person. Jesus went after the worst of the worst. He fought the worst of the worst with the whip and the Pharisees. And the only time to do that, and that's why, like if you're getting your average situation with your average Christian, like they would tell Jesus that he wasn't being like Jesus. Jesus, you're not being Jesus. You can't pull that whip in the church. What are you doing? This is what I tell people. I'm like, when you're dealing with extreme narcissists, you got to pull that whip out or you're done.
The thing with Jesus, though, is that when you set the standard of grace, love, and compassion, then you've set a precedent where now your word matters. And you can, with authority, exercise judgment. Look at the woman at the well. Like, he was compassionate and gracious to her. He talked to her like a person. As a good Jew, he shouldn't talk to her at all.
Yeah.
You know, he talks to her. He spends time with her. He treats her like a human being, which he didn't have to do by their standards. And then he inserts himself into her personal life and says, you're right to say that you're not married. You've had 5 husbands, and the man you're living with now is not your husband. He called out the wrong way of living. But he did it after being gracious, after being compassionate, setting a standard of what biblical masculinity is. And biblical masculinity is driven by love, without question. The harder you love someone, the more you're willing to sacrifice for them, the more you're willing to give up of yourself for them, right? So...
Can I give you an example of the situation I was in?
Sure. Yeah.
So in one of these homes that I was in, there was I was dating the girl, and one of the kids had this. It was like this out of control homeschool 15-year-old. He was just going nuts. And like the dad is someone that I would that is the picture of what I'm giving of this, like, but it's not going to do anything.
Yeah.
And he just takes his drink, sees the kid almost harassing the mom, harassing the sisters, doing all this crazy stuff, and he takes his beer, drinks it, goes upstairs. 6'5", strong, whatever, could beat up anyone, but wouldn't do it. And so I have to basically get incredibly awkward in front of like 5 or 6 people and almost throw this kid up against the wall. I don't do it, but it was like I dropped an atom bomb in there because I didn't like the way he was treating the mom. And this is the exact type of dude that would be like, Joel, I don't talk like that. I never talk like that. Joel talks with his hands a little bit. Joel has long hair. Joel's a little fruity, but it's like, bro, at the end of the day, I had to handle stuff in your home,
dude,
because the kid was saying all this stuff to your wife, and it's like, but it was incredibly uncomfortable for me.
Sure.
Being a man is hard.
Yeah.
It's hard, dude, to shut in front of 6 people that you don't know super well to say, hey, at the dinner table, you need to stop right now.
Yeah. Well, so the 3 things to remember is that masculinity is driven by love, masculinity is demonstrated in self-control, and masculinity is demonstrated in competence and readiness. Like, you have to be competent, physically able, and ready.
It has nothing to do with me talking with my hands and this.
No.
And the fact that, I don't have a beard. Masculinity has absolutely nothing.
Let me tell you
to
something
do
about
with
a beard, man. A beard is just man's makeup.
I wouldn't if I
Bottom
could
line,
grow a
dude.
beard, dude. I'd have it, but I can't do it.
Have you seen those images of the AI images of Jason Momoa with beard and then without beard? And
Yeah,
how,
it's horrifying.
He almost looks like a woman
It's
without
horrifying.
the beard.
The reason Brandon Lake doesn't get all that hate is Brandon Lake is Christian Jason Momoa.
He's bearded up.
But he's got this nose. He's got this thing.
He's jacked with the muscles. Which, to be fair, like I said, I agree with being physically fit, and that's the other thing. People are going to say I'm fat shaming and stuff, and whatever. I'm not fat shaming. Yep. Biblical masculinity is also demonstrated in being physically capable and being healthy. A part of self-control is not freaking overeating. Right? Like, I'm just going to say it. Self-control is if you're going to sit there and be a glutton and just feast all day long. Sorry, every pastor, I'm a preacher's kid. Sorry, every pastor that eats 3 plates at the potluck. You're not setting a good example.
You're in sin.
I'm not trying to be a butthole, and I have eaten my fair share of an extra plate at a potluck. I'm just telling you, that is not the biblical standard. You're not demonstrating manliness or masculinity. It's not masculine that I can eat a whole large pizza. That's not self-control. It's masculine to say, I could eat this whole large pizza. I'm going to eat my portion of it and then offer it to other people. Or offer it to other people first and then eat what's left. Maybe that's the more Jesus thing. Talk about the position of husband and wife. Biblical masculinity earns that woman's respect and that wife's respect by the sacrifice. When the woman realizes, when a wife realizes how much you will sacrifice. What I mean by this in today's standards is that you will, sometimes decision-making is huge for people. Decision-making is huge. So you're the one who's going to take the time, make the decision, and bear the weight of those decisions in your family. That's huge as a man, to take that responsibility off of your wife sometimes. But at the same time, you have to prove yourself capable to make those decisions. For instance, we're building our home. I've done the research. I've called the builders. I've talked to my father-in-law and said, hey, do you know anybody who has excavators? Let's talk. Let's have them have a price war, find the best price. I've done all these things so that my wife does not have to. And my wife, I've built up enough trust in our relationship by her watching how much I'm willing to give for our relationship that she trusts me with those decisions. And that's a huge load off of her mind, that she doesn't have to worry about all that. At the same time, I have to prove myself competent to make those freaking decisions. I can't just wing it. My wife makes tons of money. I'm going to sit on my butt, play video games, and then just guess about all the big decisions of our life. You're stupid. Sorry if that's a non-Jesus thing, but if that's your life, if you're just sitting on your butt playing video games, letting your wife make all the money, and then you expect to make all the decisions, you're not on planet Earth.
That was to a T one of the situations.
Well, you're a citizen of Mars at that point. Like, move.
It was work, come home, play video games for 4 or 5 hours, kids get home, scream at the kids, and then have a big freak out, and then go to the wife and love bomb. Go to bed. I mean, I was in this for like a month. Yeah. I was in this home for like a month, helping build my show, build my band, and I was like, this dude, he doesn't look as much like, but he had like a big gut, so you would see, and he had the short hair, so the men would be like, oh yeah, it's one of the bros. You know what I mean? It's like,
well, and here's the thing,
because he can't physically.
I'm not trying to judge anybody out of being a man. Here's what I will say: if any of this triggers you a little bit, and you're like, it's like, oh shoot, I'm not in shape I need to be. I'm not the kind of spokesperson or representative for my family I need to be. You can start immediately. You can start by making better choices on the regular, but it starts with core values. I'm going to embrace self-control. I'm going to embrace love and compassion, and I'm going to embrace readiness. That's physically, spiritually, mentally. Every day, you got to be a good example of those things, and you can do that without making a dime. You can do that without making a dime. There's so much more to leading a family, to being a man or a woman, than just your job.
All I'm trying to say is, if all the things you mentioned and I mentioned, if you as a man are not every single one of those things, you cannot go online and call someone a fairy.
It's not a good look. Masculinity's got nothing to do with the length of your hair. I've had my hair halfway down my back and donated it to charity. And then I've had no beard. I've had beard. And my beard ain't even that great. I probably look a little homeless when I got the beard growing for a long time. That's got nothing to do with my masculinity.
To me, like, what I would probably say, like, that is the most masculine part of me is, like, with my worship ministry, my worship leading, and my TV show, is we have these incredibly difficult tasks, and I go to my team.
Yeah.
And I lead them through this in a competent way to find out what they need. There's no screaming, yelling, there's no using. And I'm like, let's make this awesome together. And I know for a fact, if you put any of these dudes in my comment section in that same thing, they're going to cuss out the girl, they're going to cuss out this person, they're going to leave frustrated.
Part of proper leadership is
you put everyone's needs before yours.
You put the needs of the flock before your own. So if you're going to lead people on like this, an expedition, which a show is like this, like it's a serious endeavor. Proper leadership and masculine leadership is meeting their needs along the way.
That's all
Jesus was a servant king, being a servant for them, meeting their needs, making sure their needs are met, so that way you can get the job done. And that's a big responsibility. End of story.
Or even like the temperance, because I've known, like I said, I've got a bunch of examples. Several of these type of men, they'll get online and they don't have a following. It's just they got a Facebook page,
Yeah.
and they will rage. They will rage online if someone says something.
Yeah.
And I have to have this absurd control because I'm getting called everything 20,000 times a day, and it's like,
Here's one hard and fast rule for men online. Once you say you're done, when you say good day, peace out, whatever it is, no matter what they say afterwards, I don't care if they talk about your mama. I don't care if they call you a fat slob who has no future. I don't care what they say about you and how false it is. When you have pulled out of the conversation, if you're drawn back in, you lose all power. Flat out. This is a hard and fast rule for online interactions as a masculine man. When you say, I'm done, God bless, peace out, have a nice life, you cannot be drawn back into that conflict, because then you give them power in the conversation. You make it known to everybody who's eating their popcorn and enjoying your little online fight. Oh, this guy's words have power over this guy. He was done with the conversation, but now he's drawn back in. It's like no matter what they say, even if it's at the pit of crazy evil that they spit, you cannot get drawn back in. Hard and fast rule. If you like this clip from the Not Gospel Studios YouTube channel, don't forget to share. Click on one of the other links and videos. You can find them here and subscribe. I think it's down here. Tell your friends about us. Tell them that it's healthy, that it's vegan, and all of those things. Keep being awesome, because that's how God made you.